Welcome. We'll get started shortly. Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. There are no polling questions or attendance checks. Instead, you will demonstrate your knowledge by taking a brief multiple-choice quiz using the Earmark app. Visit earmark.app in your web browser. You can also download the mobile app by scanning the QR code on the screen. Log in, or if you're new, create your free account. Be sure to use a valid email address because that's where we'll send your course completion certificates. From the home screen, scroll down to find the course. You can also tap the magnifying glass icon to search for the course. Tap on the course artwork, then the Enroll button. On the Course tab, you'll find the recording and quiz questions. Complete the quiz to earn your CPE certificate. It takes us a few days to create the course on the app, so if you are attending this session live, please wait a few days. We'll email you a link to the course when it is ready. If you have questions or need help, email us at support@earmarkcpe.com. And now, on to the event. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Earmark Expo. I'm Blake Oliver, joined as always by David Leary. And in an Earmark Expo, that's where we take the latest accounting tech for a test drive. We're going to floor it with a live demo of a game-changing app. David and I are in the driver's seat, putting this app through its paces and asking the tough questions every accountant wants to know the answers to. And guess what? You're along for the ride. We want you, our live audience, to help us navigate. Ask your own questions in the chat, and we will highlight them for John to answer. This is your chance to see cutting-edge accounting tech in action, get your questions answered in real time, and gain insights that could transform your practice. So take a seat and let's roll with today's Earmark Expo.
Like, I have a question about when you had your firm. When it came to payroll, did you offer it as a service?
We did. We did accounting, bookkeeping, accounting, payroll, and bill pay. And we did a little bit of sales tax, 1099 compliance, all that stuff.
Did you calculate and run the payroll yourself, or did you completely outsource that to another service who did it all for you?
We we outsourced all of the calculations. We used payroll services, but we didn't just leave our clients to go do it themselves. We were in the loop on that. So we were helping to make sure that, timesheets got submitted. We would submit those on behalf to the payroll service, that sort of thing.
Got it. But then the payroll service would do they do the payroll, they calculate the tax forms, pay the taxes, they file the forms for you. Got it.
That's right.
So then because I don't want to date us here, but you had your firm a long time ago. What did you do for sales tax? Was this an even option to have services do this for you when you had your firm, or was it a lot of in-house?
Sales tax we would do manually ourselves for them. Yes, when we did it.
Got it. So I'm hoping today we're going to learn about Avalara's Managed Returns for accountants and see how what you used to do for payroll we can kind of do with sales tax now.
Ooh, that's exciting, because that was always a big challenge. We could only do sales tax for a few clients, and it was pricey because it took a lot of labor on our side to do it. And I never liked, as the owner, the risk of potentially getting it wrong. And that's always what's nice about having a partner in that. So I'm glad to have John here from Avalara talking today about managed returns for accountants. And John, I understand we're going to get to see what this looks like.
Well, we're going to be certainly showing it today. I'm going to certainly run it through its paces with you. And I appreciate the payroll reference there. Did payroll and have done payroll in the past too, and it's exactly as you're kind of talking through there. Most firms today do sales and use taxes manually, which is surprising to me just because of all the due dates associated with it that you have to meet.
That's right. And if you get it wrong, then that's sales tax audits, that's liability, that's a lot of time that is taken up, and just fixing it. Yeah.
It's fixing it. It's the notices associated with it. I always tell people that, it's the problem with sales tax compliance is you're basically taking a process that's done every month and you're filing. So if you do have an issue in an audit, it's not usually one issue. It's an issue you've been repeating every month for the past couple of years when they actually showed up to audit you. And now all of a sudden you not only have it might be one area you're fixing, but it might be over a course of 3 years. So it can be somewhat of a challenge sometimes to sort of think through it.
That's for sure.
So At Avalara here, we're actually offering a set of tools for firms to use. So we're actually, I'm going to actually show you one of them, which is the returns filing tool that we'll be taking a look at. But at Avalara, we actually have a series of tools, and it's all in an effort to help firms sort of deal with compliance or sales tax compliance. And it tries to look at all the facets like filing and returns, like the output, the end product associated with it. But there's several things that need to happen before that. There's like the registration. Well, there's actually identifying or even understanding if your firm needs to register is like the first problem that usually shows up. And then after you get them registered, you know, we can help with the registration. We can certainly help with the research associated with items that are taxable or not taxable in different states. Like that's always like a discussion point, but like the monthly process associated with it, the time associated with compliance is usually in the monthly returns filing that we actually
So that's what we're going to see today is the getting it done every month for
exactly.
the states that we've identified we have a obligation to file in.
You got it. We're going to actually take a look at that. And I can go ahead. Oh, we open up. I'm actually just going to show one slide. I'm not going to PowerPoint you to death, as though I'm sure you're all excited about seeing some slides. But I just want to show one slide. You know, the challenge of doing returns is, I mean, you can certainly log on to a website, type some numbers in, right, that need to get filed and file the return, right? That, if you're just filing one return a month, that's a great way to do it, right? But if you have a lot of clients that are filing returns, if you have like 5 or 10 clients, they're all filing 2 or 3 returns a month, that's a lot of different files you got to worry about. It's a lot of different returns, and like, how are you managing and organizing that? That's why Avalara came out with Managed Returns for Accountants. Managed Returns for Accountants is it's a software application. It's designed to create like a centralized view of all the returns that are due with the due dates, and it gives you a central point to sort of manage all that. It's actually designed for firms to use. It's what actually Avalara uses it internally actually to manage all of their compliance offerings. And we've actually reformatted their offering, and we actually have an external facing version of it, which is what we use actually for the accounting channel. It handles all of the US sales and use tax returns, as well as Canada. We have another, if that's a concern for you, we have another offering we certainly offer around that. And it's actually based on the Avalara technology, again, that we use internally, that we're actually filing a little over 36 billion in sales taxes annually in. And that's what I'm planning on showing you today.
Great.
I'm just gonna pop out of here and let me know when you can see the tab.
Got it.
Awesome. So this is the system. Again, it's a centralized dashboard. It's designed to consolidate all the returns that are due in a central view here, and I'm in the filing task tab. Now, I've got a little bit of a special view showed here, and I'm basically showing you 3 months at once, and next I want to show you some stuff about how we track the filing status of all the returns that are in here. But with this presentation I'm about to show, I'm going to be showing you January, February, and March of this year, and all the returns are different stages to kind of show you what you have as an output or an end product when you're using this. But before I get into it, again, centralized view, and this view is definitely customizable. Any of the fields you see here can be moved, adjusted to create a special view. And we do that because a lot of clients have different needs on how they like to see stuff, how you're reconciling information. So you can certainly create separate views in there to sort of help you through the process and manage the returns filing cycle. Having said that, again, I'm in what we call the filing view, which is keeping track of everything that needs to get filed, and everything is assigned to status. And so if I scroll down now, again, January's been filed. So this is the month of January, and those are all on what we call the filed status because Avalara has actually completed the filing for you. You can actually open it up if you want to see a return. I know you're dying to see a tax return. You can actually go into any one of these. You can pull up the PDF, and you can actually see the paper form that was already filed by Avalara. So again, this is a service. So Avalara is generating these returns, and Avalara is filing and paying these returns on behalf of your clients. The output of this is all being shown here. You as the firm are responsible for getting the data into the system so that Avalara can file it.
So, so I'm curious. I know a lot of states
Yep.
still require paper filing of
Oh, interesting.
sales tax
Okay.
forms, right? Like, how many is it?
So interesting you say that. So there are very few states that require a paper, believe it or not. Back in the day, and I started doing taxes, taxes in general, I started doing them back in 94. But 94, 95, 96, like that time frame was sort of the transition when states started transitioning over to EDI forms, electronic data files, basically, was kind of the beginning. But in this day and age, most returns are either filed by web, through a web file, logging onto a website, or actually Avalara files most of our stuff through, we call them auto files, but basically we have a relationship with a lot of states, and we have an arrangement with them on how we can automatically file with most states without actually having to log in and do anything.
Got it. So for most of this, I'm going to be like, when you pull up that paper form, that's the PDF
exactly
generated that represents the electronic filing.
Exactly. And it's funny you say it that way, because like we tried to like remove this view from the software. We actually, because like it's exactly what you say, it's a rendition of what's filed, but it's not actually what's filed. But most customers still want to see the piece of paper, right?
Yes.
So at the end of the filing process, we actually have a method here where you can actually just basically select all the returns that were filed, and you actually can compress it all to a single zip file and email it to your client of all the returns that were filed. They generally want to see the PDF that was filed, and they also want to see the confirmation information that we have, like the proof of, I call it proof of file, proof of pay, but like the numbers that the state sends back showing you that it was filed.
Got it.
But you're absolutely, that's all maintained in this view. And if you select, and now these are in what we call filed, so these are already been filed. But if I just scroll down, these are in what we call approved to file. So this is, for example, Washington State. It's been approved to file. I've gone in here, selected it, I've done my reconciliation, and I've just gone up and I've said, approved to file. And from a firm point of view, I'm done now. Avalara is going to take over at this point. Avalara is going to be responsible for filing and paying the returns on behalf of the firm and the client. And we're going to let you know when it's taken care of when we update the status in here.
So it's my responsibility to reconcile those sales, reconcile the payments, make sure the bank accounts are done, close the books, possibly. Mm-hmm. And then this is the trigger. Somewhere there's a trigger where I tell you I'm done.
Exactly. And that's the trigger. Like you're going in here and you're selecting and saying, yep, it's approved to file, because if I haven't approved it yet, it's in what we call the pending status. So if I just get rid of these two here and do a quick little, these are in what we call pending approval. These have not been approved yet. Now, I should say, before we even get to this stage, we probably have to have data in the system, right, to reconcile and file, which I think is where you're going. And when people think of tax data, they generally think of a spreadsheet. So I talk about data all day with firms, but generally speaking, we need data in our system, tax information, in order to file the return, right? And the first question I always get, hey, what's the minimum information we need in order to file a return? And this is it. This is just the way I'm trying to show it to you. But generally speaking, the columns at the top that are in orange, those are usually the required fields. That's like the information we have to have in order to import data into our system. And that's usually the basics, right? It's the gross sales information and the tax dollars. Because usually taxes have already been calculated, right? You're getting an output, a file of some kind from your client, and you want to import that into our system. You don't want us to change the tax dollars. You just want to get those tax dollars on a return and have us file it, right? That's one way to do it. There's lots of other ways to get data on a return, though. If I actually go back here, now, as you probably all know, Avalara is known for mostly having a tax engine that calculates sales and use taxes. We call it AvaTax. Avatax is the system that most, like QuickBooks, Xero, NetSuite, Intact, like any of those systems hook up to in order to calculate taxes, right? And they all do that through our Avatax service. Well, if your client is using Avatax to calculate taxes, or you've set them up to calculate taxes with Avatax, you can actually link to their account directly here. You can actually just go into the system and say, hey, you know what? I wanna link to their existing Avatax account, so that instead of me as a firm having to worry about, well, did I import the data? Now you can actually just get a real-time feed of their data as they calculate and have it just come into the system automatically for you.
Oh, that is beautiful. That's going to save so much time.
It saves a ton, especially as a ex-preparer, saves tons of time. Right now, I'm not waiting for the client to send me their data file. They might be sending me an adjustment file, but I'm not waiting for them to send it. And then if I just go up to this transaction section here, this is actually where I can pull up. I'm just gonna open up the period here just to get something to show up for you. But this is where I can see the transactions that have been calculated in our system in Avatax, and they just flow over. And additionally, if your client's using maybe they're using like Amazon to do sales on Amazon, maybe they're using Shopify to do some of their sales, maybe they're on, I don't know, Walmart.com. But whatever they're using, we actually have ways to connect into those systems automatically and pull that data across as well. We're just looking for ways to sort of get the information into the system as fast as possible. Because from a firm point of view, we just want to get you to the point where you can reconcile the data and just approve the amounts. How do we help you with that?
That was going to be my question, is how do we reconcile?
Blake, I was about to say, exactly. I knew you were going to ask me that question. So if I go over here to reports, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull up a report here that we can actually show. And the report that we generally show this on is what we call the liability report. And it's called the liability return detail report. And I'm going to just pull it up for the company I've been working with for, let's do January of the beginning of the year here. And if I was smart, I would have run this for you ahead of time.
Well, it's going pretty fast. And we're getting, it looks like a CSV, or we're getting a zip file.
We're getting a CSV file, and now I'm wondering, let's see if I do this here, if I can just pop it in here and show it to you. Let me just do a quick
Sure.
share here, just to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like.
And if you need to reshare your screen or something, I can pull your screen down for a sec while you get it sorted out.
Yeah, let me just do this, and let me just do a quick present.
So the thing I already like about this is that we're getting the CSV file, so I can pull it into Excel and I can manipulate it however I like.
Yep.
There it is.
Yeah, perfect. So this actually, the nice thing about this report, and this is just a dump of a summary, I should say, of all the sales tax data you have for a particular month for a client. And I picked January, and this is showing us all the data in all the states they've calculated taxes. And if I scroll down, now this is probably not a tremendous, a lot of tax dollars that we have in the system, but these are the sales for the month. I can show total sales for the month. These are the total taxes I calculated for the month. Not a huge responsibility with $35. But the advantage here is it kind of gives you a holistic view of your client now, because this is the first time that we're looking at all the data they've calculated for the month, right, from a tax perspective, and we're comparing it now to the returns they have set up in our system. And it highlights quite a few things. First thing it's highlighting is like, looks like you're calculating tax in some jurisdictions that you don't have returns set up for, right? Which is a really common problem, right? You as the firm, you're responsible for filing the returns, but you might not have access to their how they're set up to calculate taxes. So this is the first time you're actually looking at their data and comparing it to the returns they're set up for, So you can actually talk to them and say, hey, it looks like you might need to think about maybe registering and setting up some information, let's say Birmingham, Alabama, for example. And if I would scroll through and tell you all the specifics on the across the top here, but what this is basically doing is it's looking at the total tax dollars that were calculated for the month, comparing it to the returns that are due, and then separating out the taxes that aren't due this month for you. The whole point of this is to compare the taxes calculated versus what's actually due. If I scroll all the way over here,
let me make sure I understand that. So you're basically recalculating the liability. We're not just taking what was.
Well, you can. So a good question. Okay. It's a very good question. Depends on the client. And I don't usually get that question. I appreciate that. Most clients, if they've calculated, let's say $100 of tax for the month, most clients don't want you changing that. They're like, hey, if I calculated $100 in tax, I want you to report $100 of tax, which depending on the situation can work out. However, you do run across situations where the client might be, look, I know my processes aren't working right. Like, I know I've got issues. Can you do me a favor? Can you recalculate the liability for me? And you can certainly do that. When you import the data, you can actually, what I tell clients or firms to do, and what I used to do myself, is I would import the sales information. I would also import the tax dollars. And there's actually a way to run a comparison between the taxes they calculated versus the taxes that need to land on the tax return. And you can certainly do that.
Got it.
It does kind of put you more into a consulting situation though, because there's, when you price this service out, a lot of people just price it like from a returns filing point of view. Hey, we're going to charge by return. And this can kind of sort of up your service level, so it takes a little bit more time to do it because you're comparing now original versus actual.
Mm-hmm.
Did I say that right? Original versus recalculated, I think is what I meant to say there.
Mm-hmm.
You can certainly, but you definitely can show value because of that. Like, I'm not just filing your returns. And it also opens up an area of a lot of additional other services a firm could offer. For example, even like right here, right? I've got, you're not registered. You're telling me you have tax dollars you want to report, but you're not registered there. Maybe you need to help the client with registration. Maybe you need to do a voluntary disclosure for them. Like, there's different services you can certainly offer around this. But if I scroll all the way over here, I know there's lots of columns here depending on what you're trying to do, and this view is definitely customizable if you want to remove some of these columns here. But this is basically showing you, this is what actually needs to get filed for the month. We break it all down for you so that, even though I calculated $35 at the beginning, I actually have $78 that needs to be reported. The common things that usually change it, some states might have prepayments you need to pay. So let's say you calculated $50 for the month from a tax perspective. You might have additional dollars the state wants you to do from a prepayment point of view. You might have quarterly amounts that are getting reported this month that weren't calculated in the current month. There might be situations where you're rounding the dollars. Discounts need to get deducted. There's all these different things that can sort of change what the return looks like in order to figure out what needs to actually be filed.
But without this data, I mean, that's the beauty of this. You're providing the accountant, excuse me, all this data. So now the accountant can actually have these discussions with the client. Because if not, you're just taking it by faith of whatever they've reported out of their point of sale and running with it.
That's a very good point. Yes. I'm just resharing here to get back to the main screen here. Mm-hmm. But that is a very important point. With the whole reason you're doing this is you're trying to give the client some visibility into how correct their data is, because a lot of times you're right, it's just sales information from a POS system. And a lot of times they might not be tracking why their sales are exempt or why they have exempt sales in there. And so when you're going through the recalculation process, you might be finding some issues you have with how you're initially calculating the taxes. And you can certainly offer up additional services to help them fix that. Can everyone see? Everyone can see this view, I think, now.
Yep, we're back.
So again, Yeah, no worries. So I'm in the filing task section, just to kind of reorientate everyone back here. I'm in the filing task section, and these are all the returns that I, for example, have due this month. And right here, we make it easy for you. We give you the gross amount, the amount of tax that was due, and you should be able to easily go through this and tie it back to the original import file that you sent into the system. Once you're happy with those amounts, this is where you can just go ahead and select one or all, and you can actually just go through and approve the liability, lock them down, and then now it's up to Avalara to go ahead and begin the filing process for you. Because again, this is a situation where you as the firm are responsible for getting the data into the system, reviewing and reconciling it, and Avalara is taking over the responsibility of filing and paying for you. The reason why we do that, and we have a couple of versions we offer this, by the way. This is the one most firms want to do. Most firms, unless you have a a large dedicated sales tax filing practice, most firms don't want to take the ownership of filing and paying the returns. That requires, understanding how all the states want to file. Is a lot more involved with that. And if you're looking to service your clients and do a lot of returns for your clients and not have to add additional headcount, this is an easy way to do it, right? You can just get the data into the system, approved, filed, and through the process. If I click on any of these drop downs here, this is where I can see some of the information, like from a total liability standpoint, of what was actually brought into the system. And it's available here on any of these drop downs. Now, how did I get these returns set up in the system? Each client's going to have a filing calendar in the system. And a filing calendar is just a listing of all the returns that a client has said that are due for the month. And this is the filing calendar. So for each one of these are each individual returns that have been set up in the system to be filed. And to put a new filing calendar in here, you can say, hey, you know what? My client just told me that they are now registered in, I'm going to say Georgia, and they just started filing the sales tax return. Now, I want to just mention a couple of things here. First of all, Georgia has a lot of tax returns, but from a filing standpoint, we isolate down the specific ones you need to worry about from a sales tax point of view. We only display those that need to come in here. You can select the ones you need. You need to tell us the filing frequency. How often do they file? Most people, the state tells you, like when you register with the state, they tell you if you're monthly or quarterly. You go ahead and select that information. My federal ID number populated automatically because I already set that up in the system. And then this is where you can also set up your electronic filing information. I like to mention this because most states, when you register now, they already include, hey, I'm glad you want to register and file and pay taxes in Georgia now, but here's your login information that you need to have in order to file this electronically. You provide that information to us so we can help set the system up accordingly. We generally don't use that information to file the return, though, going back to your original question, Blake, about like how returns are filed. Typically we use that when we're handling notices for you, because part of our service that we offer is not only are we responsible for filing and paying your returns on behalf of, basically for your benefit, for the firm's benefit, but if you do happen to get a notice, which happens a lot when you have clients that are first going up on the service, if you typed in their registration number incorrectly or something like that, and it was electronically filed, the state might not be able to find it. So sometimes you might get notices. And so if notices do get sent in, those are actually all sent over to us, Avalara. And again, we're responsible, since we're filing and paying the returns, we're responsible for resolving those notices for you as well. We're removing that from you. And if Avalara is responsible for filing it late, which, as you can probably imagine, doesn't happen, but if it did, we would be responsible for those penalties and interest. But you would just go ahead, fill out this information, and we actually have this little bypass methodology we can use to get past this screen. hit the next button, and this is where you can fill out your address information that the return needs to have. It automatically populates because I've already got it configured. And then this is where you would answer usually some return specific questions or some state specific questions. And again, this is usually all provided to you with the registration information the state sends back to you. But the most important thing usually is the registration number. And we give you a suggested format that usually that number comes in that we would need to see on the form. The other added thing here is once you fill out this information, like once you set up what we call the filing calendar entry or the request, again, we're recognizing that this as a firm, this is probably not what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. It actually gets queued up, and actually someone on the Avalara side will actually review this information for you to make sure you're good to go. But you've set it all up, and then that is how you set up a filing calendar in our system. Now, there's some other stuff you can set up in here as well. I don't know if you want me to probably go through all that, but like depending on the return, someone mentioned some store filings. David, if you had like store returns that you were filing, you would set locations up in the system and locations of the store numbers. So those would be the stores that are actually, you know, there's usually some other information the tax return needs when there's store-based filings. We can go ahead and set that stuff up in the system for you as well. But all that's done here, and then we would actually go through, and then you would just need to keep this, like from a firm point of view, you would need to just keep this up to date on a monthly basis with your clients.
So one thing I'm trying to grasp in my brain here, we talked about the payroll example. You're just providing the time, the hours worked, and the payroll company really does everything for you. But this
Correct.
feels like is some responsibility on you as the firm or the business owner to make sure a lot of data is put in correctly just on the schedule of what you have to file, who you have to file to. But then when it comes to the calculations as well, I'm trying to understand the handoff. Like, when is it okay for you to actually go file the returns, or how do you know as Avalara you're filing correct data?
Yeah, good question. It's based on the approval that I was showing you earlier. If I go back over here, because, well, let me take a step back. Remember when we initially had the conversation, like I was like, hey, you know what, there's a couple of things you need to get in the system, right, in order to file the return. And the big thing is the data files, right? So you need to make sure the client has imported their data into the system, or you have imported the data into the system. Because behind this, remember I told you could attach those AvaTax accounts?
Yes. So
if the client has an Avalara system that they're calculating tax in QuickBooks with, for example, you know, that's an easy one, right? You're automatically going to see that. You might need to help reconcile it, but it's there. However, if there are other files that need to get in there, you know, generally, if you're the firm and you're doing the returns for them, you would be responsible normally to get that data into the system. So you would probably have part of your engagement letter with the client is probably specifying the time frame you're going to give those files to you in order to import into the system here.
Okay.
Once you get that information, though, the handoff point, which is where you're going, the handoff point is like when you say, hey, you know, I'm selecting and I'm approving. Once that happens, you as the firm, you're kind of done at that point, right? You're done. Avalara's taken over at that point, and now Avalara is going to file and pay the returns for you.
And then how you said when I set up the schedules, you have team at Avalara is going to review what I put in to set up that schedule. Are you reviewing this quote unquote approved to file data that I'm passing over to you?
Good question. So there's the returns that you're setting up in the system which that's occasionally, right? Because they don't change returns there, but like that's on an ongoing basis. Yeah, we're reviewing those, absolutely. And then the second thing we're doing on a monthly basis is what you just hit on, where once you hit approve to file on these, there's actually a process that gets kicked off in the background that actually we have what they're data checks, I call them. But like we look at the data that was imported on the return, the total tax and the gross dollars, and because we're always trying to reconcile the tax dollars to the gross amount to make sure the return's what we call in balance. But that's all done in the background, and that's what Avalara takes care of. We resolve those issues. If we have questions, we'll actually be coming back to you if we need to get any answers to some questions in the process.
Yeah, so there are checks and balances happening before.
Oh, exactly.
This goes out the door.
Yeah, exactly. And then what happens is the returns get filed, and then once they're filed, they all go into the filed status, which is, I'm just going to change back over here to January to just kind of give you a quick view of that. Once they are finished, they actually all show up, and this is when you know it's done at that point, right? So they're filed. You can actually open them up. You can see the liability that was reported, and then that's when you can actually, if I were to open this up here, I showed you earlier, there's this PDF. You actually get to see the PDF before the returns are actually filed as a firm. Like, you'll see the PDF. And some firms want to see it because, like, normally you're just looking at data coming in, so you're looking at total tax dollars or gross amounts, but maybe you want to see if it's putting the reduced food item amount on the right line of the return or something. You can certainly look at that. But once the return is filed, however it's filed, going back to the original question, I don't have any in here because I'm in a sandbox system, but like whatever was filed, if it was a file, if it was an electronic data feed, like whatever was filed shows up in here. That's the confirmation, because when we initiate any sort of push of data to a state, there's confirmations that come back, and that stuff is all stored in here for you to review if you want to take a look at it.
So the full end-to-end of the workflow. You push the return, you get the confirmation and store that.
Exactly. And then depending on the situation, what your arrangement with your client, usually at the end of the month, you're probably going in here, you're probably selecting all the returns, and there's a way actually to download. You can download the CNF, which is the confirmation information, but usually you're downloading the confirmation of filing, the PDF return, because everyone loves to see the paper, and then you're just downloading that into a single file, and usually you're providing that to your client monthly. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Perfect. But that's usually what happens on a monthly basis. And then if you have audits or whatever have you, since you have everything in one system, you can tie in the data imported in the transactions to the returns all in here if you need to help for backup support for an auditor, basically generate work papers or any of that stuff. Speaking of that, if anyone's familiar with the reporting inside of Avalara, any of the reports you can generate in our Avatax system, all those reports are located here as well. You can do transaction reports, return reports, any of that stuff is all controlled here. So if you do need to run reports to review or look at anything, it's available here as well. The only other thing I'll mention is if you go here inside of the settings, this is where all the configuration's done. I just went through, as you mentioned, a lot of different stages in the workflow process in order to get returns out. Again, Avalara recognizes that a lot of firms don't do this on a regular basis. So we actually have a separate support group that actually helps you go through this process. So when you actually sign up for the Managed Returns for Accountants platform, when you actually sign up for it, we actually bring you through what we call a go live process. It's a live session. Let me mention a couple of things. We actually do have some recorded training you can go through. There is that. It's online training you can go through. We start you with that, but then we always set up touch point live sessions with you to see how you're doing, if you have any questions, and we also put you in contact with the preparer that's going to be responsible in working with these returns with you. So you can basically understand the end-to-end process, both what Avalara is doing inside of the system and then what we're doing with you as far as a live person point of view goes. We do that because, one, we know you want to give most firms want to give a different service level to their clients. Avalara offers a very specific approach, right? We file a lot of returns and it's mostly a self-serve model. that you're utilizing. Most firms want to offer more of a customized approach, and so we're trying to give you all the tools to enable you to be able to do that. The other thing I'll mention in here is I mentioned some of the other options, but obviously if anyone's familiar with configuring or setting up AvaTax to calculate taxes, very familiar process in here as well. You still need to set up the system to tell us what states they're registered in, what states they want to calculate tax in. All that stuff can be managed here. You can also have as many people as you want logging into the system from a firm point of view, depending on how many preparers you have at the company that are managing your client's workflow. You can also assign the returns inside of our system to preparers specifically, preparer groups, and you can also create other management groups within inside of the system to sort of review returns that need to get taken care of. I can't stress it enough. It's all based on workflow. We're trying to create a workflow system to make sure that you're not missing any returns. To go back to your original question though, Dave, it's like, what happens if the firm never goes in here and approves the return, right? Avalara will actually automatically, well, we're probably going to call you if we don't hear from you at all. But if we don't hear from you and you ignores us completely until by the 10th of the month, we're actually going to auto approve whatever's in there. And we do that as a fail-safe, as you can probably imagine. We're going to auto approve, and whatever's in there, we're going to file and pay. And normally that causes the clients to reach out at that point and ask what's going on if there's an issue. But the only other thing I'll mention is the other thing that's associated with this, which I didn't bring up, is the funding policy. So if you imported $1,000 worth of tax in our system, you're gonna, as a firm, you're probably gonna reconcile to the amount that's actually due. It's usually less than 1,000. So let's say $900 was due for the month. We do set up an arrangement, a funding arrangement with the end client, because normally you probably want us pulling the money from the client. So if there's $900 due, we're going to usually set up a banking relationship with your client to pull that money out of their account. It's usually by the 12th, 13th of the month. We're going to pull the money so that we can actually set that up for payments to the different states.
Makes sense. So I'm looking at the website for this, and there's two columns, and there's two products that sound very familiar or similar. So Avalara Managed Return for Accountants, which I think is what you're showing us, but then you have Avalara Returns for Accountants. Is that a different offering, a different product? I'm trying to understand side by side what this means.
Yep. Can you see the screen right now?
Yes.
Okay. You're absolutely right. Thank you for bringing that up. There's actually two offerings we have specific to firms and returns filing. And I was going through Managed Returns for Accountants. And again, that is you as the firm are responsible for setting up the filing calendar. You as the firms usually are responsible for importing the data. Clients can import data too, but usually the firm's responsible for getting it in. Adjusting and then approving the liabilities, right? The firm, you do that. And then the orange section here is Avalara. Avalara is taking over the filing at this point. We're going to file and pay the returns. Life is good. As anyone that uses Avalara probably knows, because we file so many returns, we put the client under some timelines, right? We want data in by a certain point. We want liabilities approved by a certain point. Well, let's just say your client doesn't have a practice that can follow that pattern. Like, let's just say they can't reconcile their data and get it to you till the 15th of the month or something, like late. We have another returns filing offering called, it's really close, called Avalara Returns for Accountants as far as names go. But this is a true end-to-end firms responsible for everything filing process. In this process, you're responsible for everything I just talked about, setting the system up, importing data, and making sure the liabilities reconcile and make sense, right? You as a firm are responsible for that. But you're also saying, you know what? I actually also want to do the return preparation, file and pay and notice management for the client. I want to own the client experience from end to end. We do have an offering specific to that. It's called ARA, and the I used to use this myself. The thing about the product is because we were just talking earlier about filing automation. There's a lot of filing automation we do with web filing. Like, you as a firm get access to all of those automated filing options if you want to be responsible for filing and paying on behalf of your client.
This slide helped so much. Super clear. I understand the differences now.
Yeah, no worries. This comes up a lot because what a lot of firms do is actually buy both. They'll buy MRA and they'll be like, hey, you know what? I have a client that gives me data every month, same time. It's not complicated. I import it into the system, prove and file the returns. But I've got these other clients though that they don't necessarily want me registering on time. They might not want to file on time. They're out there. We probably all know and love them. But if you're dealing with like a situation where you're doing voluntary disclosures and you have to file like 3 years back of returns for your client or something like that, most people use ARA for that. They want to just basically do the returns themselves. They'll import the data, will generate the returns and help with that filing process. Back filing, basically. I don't know if that helps. Any other questions on that? And because you're owning the end-to-end experience, I should mention, obviously you're handling the notices at that point. Banking comes up quite a bit on this, and most people opt to do the ACH debits with those filings. So again, you're responsible for, as the firm, you're responsible for initiating the filing and the payment.
And what does this cost about? How does this, an accounting firm's ready to do this? What's the investment for this? How do I even monetize that back with my clients?
Good question. Like anything in Avalara, it's one of those, it depends, right? It depends on how many returns you've signed up for and what tier you're buying into it, how many returns you want to file through Avalara. As you can imagine, MRA is a little more, costs a little bit more. You can think, I don't know, it depends on the tier, but you can think anywhere between $25 and $30 a return, generally speaking, on the MRA side. ARA, because you own the experience, you own the end-to-end experience, the pricing on that's a lot cheaper. I don't actually know what the pricing is on that, but it's a lot cheaper because you're just using our platform at that point. You're not really using our services in order to file.
Makes sense.
If that helps out a little. And again, you get the same support you get up here for MRA, you also get down here on ARA. You do get a sign, even though we're not filing the returns for you, you get a dedicated support person that works with you if you have questions or those issues that you're going through the process, that kind of thing. We certainly do work with you.
Makes sense. Did you have any other questions at all, Blake, coming through?
No, this is really helpful. Anything else we should know, John?
Man, the only other thing I'll mention, because I can talk about taxes all day, right? But the only other thing I'd mention is I just spent a lot of time talking about our returns filing products. What a lot of firms use this for is like, hey, give me your data, and then when you file the returns on their behalf, you also learn a lot about their other practices, right, that they're doing. But there's a lot of other services you can offer that Avalara can help with. If you're having a situation where you're doing voluntary disclosures and you need to calculate back liabilities or something like that for the disclosure, we can help with that. If you need help with registration, Avalara offers a service where you as a firm can use us as the back office to create the registrations for you on your behalf. If you also have a situation where your client's asking you tax questions, right? You're filing their returns. They might be, hey, you know what? We're selling health bars or protein bars across the US. Can you help us figure out how to tax them in the different states? We have research offerings and research products that work specifically with our other offerings to help you do that research on behalf of your client. But just different things we do in order to help with the filing.
Great to know. And where should accountants go if they want to learn more and sign up?
Awesome, good question. I'm really hoping I have that slide here, and I don't. You can go to avalara.com. Oh, actually, it's on the.
We put it up on the screen for you.
It's on the screen right here. You can go to avalara.com/accountants, and that'll actually walk through all the offerings we have for firms and how firms typically want to use it. And you'll actually see some videos with me doing some demos on there as well.
Fantastic. John, thank you so much for your time today, for walking us through the product. And if you've joined us live, stay tuned for a quick message about how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending today. The course will be up on the Earmark app in a few days. Thanks, John. We'll see you around.
Hey, thank you. Have fun. Bye.
Today's event has ended. To earn CPE, go to earmark.app or scan the QR code on the screen. Then log in or create your free account. Search for the course by tapping on the magnifying glass icon on the home screen and then entering the name of this event. It takes a few days to make the course, so if you're attending this event live, keep an eye out for an email letting you know when the course is available. Pass the quiz to earn your CPE, then tap the button to email yourself a certificate. Stay tuned for more events from Earmark. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.